I pray that God's word is spoken and that God's word is heard. Amen. Please be seated. Louis Crew, of blessed memory, was a layperson very involved in Integrity, which was the Episcopal Church's first gathering with the intention of inclusion of LGBTQ folk. Louis was amazing. He was a scholar and a regular at General Convention. And one of the things Louis did was he kept a database of all the ordained people in the church. And all of the ordained people in the church. And whenever it was one's ordination anniversary, he would send us an email wishing us a holy pedicure. Because beautiful are the feet of those, right? And so every time I hear that passage, whether it's in its original Isaiah context or Paul lifting it up, I think of Louis Crew and his encouragement to proclaim the good news, as punny as his encouragement was. The season after Pentecost is that season of sharing the good news, of proclaiming the good news, and we tend to reflect on questions of discipleship in light of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And we remember that faithful discipleship seeks transformation for us and for the world. Today is no different. We have 4 powerful readings to remind us that throwing ourselves on the grace, mercy, and love of God is the transformative way of life. And this transformation is salvific. As Paul writes, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord, everyone will be saved. And our role as disciples of Jesus is indeed to throw ourselves on the grace, mercy, and love of God, and then to share that grace, mercy, and love of God with others. It's almost like an ensemble cast of unlikely characters throwing themselves out into the wild reaches of space and seeing what they will find there. While all of these readings are compelling, it's hard not to begin our conversation with the story of the stormy sea. Jesus walking on the water and our dear patron Peter characteristically going above and beyond, and then throwing himself on the grace, mercy, and love of God, whether he intended to or not. We pick up in Matthew's gospel right after the feeding of the multitude, which we heard last week. And you may remember that story began with Jesus being a bit worn out, wanting some alone time. And he goes off to pray, but he doesn't get his alone time because the crowds followed him. But they did so without doing their meal planning first. So now, as we meet him this morning, the crowds have been fed and Jesus is really ready for some alone time. And he gets downright bossy with his disciples. When he tells them to get in the boat, it has the energy of a parent who has indeed discovered the end of their rope, whose patience has run out, and who very much needs just 20 minutes to breathe and complete a thought. The verb is anakazo, and it appears 9 times in the New Testament, and every time with the weight of compulsion. He does not invite them to get in the boat. He does not suggest that they get in the boat. He insists. He compels. He forced them to get in the boat. Get in the boat. Zena Jakes is a public theologian and a chaplain at Chautauqua who likens this moment to when a teacher puts a test on our desk. We didn't ask for it. We may not be ready for it, but here it is, and we are going to take it. And she suggests that when they get in that boat and begin to make their way across the sea, that is when the true test begins. They get out in the boat, out on the sea, and the storm arises. And in the ancient world, we need to remember whenever the waters become tormented and raging, it means God is up to something. It evokes the raging waters, the chaos of creation. And so we, the audience, the listeners, watch and listen in anticipation. What is God up to now? Well, these are fishermen, presumably able boatmen. But this storm is more than even they can handle. And by the time Jesus does show up, it has been hours. hours. Jesus appears at the fourth watch between 3 and 6 a.m. It's always darkest before the dawn, yes? And the fourth watch is often when God makes God's big moves in Scripture. The deliverance of Israel from Pharaoh's army at the Sea of Reeds, the time of day when Jesus often rose to pray alone, and the time when the stone would be rolled away from the empty tomb later in Matthew's Gospel, all at the fourth watch, which our English translations helpfully translate in ways that we don't understand that's what they're saying. But here we are at the fourth watch, the dark before the dawn, and the disciples are utterly, shatteringly exhausted. And Jesus comes to them walking on the sea, and they cry out, "It's a ghost!" And I love his reply. Take heart. I am. Do not be afraid. I am. Invoking the great I am, who indeed was present as the Spirit stirred the waters of creation, I am. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so then our dear Peter does what Peter does. He goes above and beyond. If it's you, command me to come out with you on the water. Really, Peter? Well, okay. Jesus, maybe excited to see such faith in his disciple, says, come. So Peter gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water and he's moving towards Jesus. And then he notices the wind and he becomes afraid and he begins to sink. And here's where he finally gets it. 3 words. Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately reaches out, catches him, and says, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Now, I think we really need to hear Jesus speak this with a tone of compassion and love, not chastisement or shame. This is the gospel in which the poor in spirit are blessed. This is the gospel in which one has faith like a mustard seed and moves mountains. Little faith? Little faith? How much faith did it take for Peter to step out of that boat, friends? That was a lot of faith. And those in the boat worship Jesus, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Something they have not said yet in this gospel, and something that will not be said again till another crisis moment when the centurion says it at the foot of the cross. Lord, save me. Truly, you are the Son of God. In the end, this pivotal moment on the raging waters reveals to the disciples and to us who Jesus is. I am God, God's very self, and Jesus is the God who saves. They learn this life-giving transformation that comes when we throw ourselves on the grace, mercy, and love of God. Zena Jakes notes that this deep learning didn't come from study or a committee meeting or even watching Jesus do amazing things, but in the grips of a devastating storm. And so she often invites her audiences, so I invite all of us to consider, when have we learned our greatest life lessons? Those lessons that we still feel in our very being, those lessons that made us who we understand ourselves to be as a person. I invite you to think about that now. You don't have to say anything out loud. We can keep this one in our hearts. But think about those lessons. And then let's ask ourselves, did they come in times of ease? Or in times of a turbulent storm? Like the heroes of every space epic, often the greatest character transformations come in such storms. And this deep truth is one of the reasons why such epics speak so powerfully to us, even across generations. God does not promise that faith will prevent us from experiencing the storm. Witness our ancestor Joseph and what he endured. And in fact, I invite you, before next Sunday, when we hear the conclusion of Joseph's story, read the whole thing. Chapter 37 to chapter 50. It's worth reading the Joseph novella just to get what this guy goes through in that story of transformation. Or think about Dr. King. At the memorial to him at the Lorraine Motel, those same words, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." God doesn't promise that there will be no storm. God promises to be with us through the storm. And when we find ourselves in those storms, or the storm finds us, God is there. I am. Our God who saves is ready to transform us and our world through the storm with grace, mercy, and love.